I was an artist of the forbidden. My canvas, a worn-out laptop screen glowing in the dark. My subject, the sinfully beautiful woman who was both my stepmother and the star of my secret fantasies. With every stroke of my hand, her face, her curves, the way she moved, became a part of the sordid scenes playing out before me. The line between reality and fantasy was not just blurred, it had ceased to exist. In my mind, the anonymous actresses I watched were just stand-ins, placeholders for the only woman I truly wanted. My headphones were a sealed tomb, a shield against the world outside, and in my private darkness, I was the master of a reality only I could see, feel, and touch. Until one night, the door creaked open, and the world I had so carefully constructed came crashing down. She was there, her shadow falling over me like a judgment. The headphones were still on, trapping me in my moment of shame. But the look in her eyes wasn't disgust. It was something else entirely, a silent, knowing hunger that promised to fulfill a longing I never dared to speak aloud. The suburban American dream wasn't a dream for me. It was a cage. Our house, a two-story colonial with a manicured lawn in a quiet cul-de-sac, was a facade of normalcy. Inside, I was a prisoner to my own mind. My name is Jake, and I was 16, a sophomore in high school. On the outside, I was just a kid. I played video games, hung out with my friends, and tried to avoid my homework. But on the inside, I was a battlefield. The war was between the boy I was supposed to be and the man I was secretly becoming. The enemy was an insidious, relentless desire that had taken root in my soul, and its name was Sarah. Sarah wasn't my biological mother. She came into our lives 3 years ago, a whirlwind of charm and grace who captivated my dad, and, to my horror, me. She was everything. My real mom wasn't vibrant, beautiful, and full of life. With her long dark hair that smelled of coconuts, and the way her jeans hugged her curves, she was a walking, breathing temptation. She was the kind of woman you saw in movies, a perfect blend of innocence and something deeply, deliciously wicked. My dad, a good, hard-working man, was blinded by her. He saw a loving wife and a doting stepmother. He never saw the way I watched her, the way my heart hammered in my chest when she smiled at me or touched my arm. He was oblivious to the battlefield raging inside me. Guilt was my constant companion. It was a cold, heavy stone in my stomach, a reminder that what I felt was wrong, unnatural, and a betrayal of the man who raised me. I tried to suppress it. I threw myself into sports. I stayed out late with my friends, and I spent hours in my room, trying to outrun the thoughts that haunted me. My room became my sanctuary and my prison. The walls were covered with wrestling posters and faded band logos, a monument to the teenager I was trying to be. But the real me was hidden in the glowing screen of my laptop. It was here, in the dead of night, that I sought refuge from my unfulfilled desires. The internet was a vast ocean of information, and I, a lonely sailor, was charting a course into its darkest depths. I started with harmless searches, but the algorithm, a cunning and complicit accomplice, quickly led me down a rabbit hole of explicit content. It wasn't just the physical acts that captivated me. It was the raw, unrestrained intimacy. And as I watched, my mind, a traitorous conspirator, began to substitute the faces on the screen with hers. A voluptuous brunette with a mischievous smile became Sarah. A scene of a woman in a kitchen, wearing only an apron, became a twisted version of our home, with Sarah as the main character. The fantasy was both exhilarating and terrifying. It was a secret world, where I could indulge my deepest, most forbidden desires, without the crushing weight of reality. One night, the fantasy was so vivid it felt real. I had a pair of noise-canceling headphones on, a barrier between my world and the one outside my door. The images on the screen were a chaotic blur of pleasure and passion, but my mind was laser-focused on one thing. A woman with a figure so similar to Sarah's, it made my stomach clench with a mix of longing and shame. My hands, guided by a rhythm I had perfected over months, moved with a desperate urgency. I was a puppet, and my desires were the strings. Suddenly, a creak from the hallway broke through my haze. The sound was faint, but it was enough to send a jolt of panic through me. I froze, my body rigid, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I tore the headphones off, the silence of my room a sudden, shocking reality. But it was too late. The door, which I had thought was closed, was slightly ajar. A sliver of light from the hallway cut across my floor, and I saw a shadow, a long, slender shadow that could only belong to one person. I fumbled with the laptop, my hands trembling. The screen was still on, a glaring witness to my sin. I wanted to scream, to disappear, to rewind time, but I could only watch in silent horror as the door swung open. The light from the hallway spilled into my room, illuminating the figure standing in the doorway. It was her, Sarah. She was wearing a simple nightgown, her hair in a loose bun, and her face was a mask of... what? Shock? Disgust? Disappointment? I couldn't tell. My panic was a suffocating blanket, and all I could think was, she knows. She saw everything. The silence in the room was louder than any sound. It was the silence of a world ending. I wanted to cry out, to explain, to apologize, but no words would come. My body was a statue of shame, frozen in the moment of my greatest vulnerability. But then, a strange thing happened. Her expression, which had been a mix of confusion and surprise, softened. A subtle change, a shift in her eyes that I couldn't comprehend. It was as if she saw not a boy caught in a shameful act, but something else entirely, something familiar, something she understood. And then she took a step inside, her shadow falling over me like a cloak. My world had officially been turned upside down. The dream was over. The nightmare had just begun. The air in the house was a different kind of thick now, not with the humid heat of a summer day, but with the suffocating tension of a secret unspoken. The night she found me, or rather, the night I let her find me, felt like a lifetime ago. A new rhythm had settled into our lives, a silent, nerve-wracking dance. I was a ghost in my own home, gliding through the hallways, avoiding eye contact, my mind a storm of anxiety and a terrifying, exhilarating anticipation. My obsession with Sarah wasn't a sudden storm. It was a slow, creeping tide. Before, it was a guilty, hidden thing. Now, with the memory of her hand on my body and the look in her eyes, it felt different. The shame was still there, a hot brand on my chest, but it was mingling with a new, intoxicating feeling, power. She knew my secret, and yet she hadn't condemned me. She had, in fact, done the opposite. This twisted, silent accord gave me a new kind of boldness, a reckless confidence that I had never felt before. I started to notice things I hadn't before. The way her long, dark hair fell across her face when she was reading on the couch. The sound of her humming to herself in the kitchen as she cooked dinner. The way her clothes seemed to fit her just right, emphasizing every curve. My imagination, already a dangerous tool, went into overdrive. I'd watch her from the corner of my eye, a casual glance that felt like a crime. The sight of her in a simple t-shirt and shorts, just being, became more arousing than any video I had ever watched. The line between my online fantasies and my real life was no longer blurred. It was gone. The most dangerous part was the projection. I had been doing it subconsciously before, but now it was a deliberate act. I'd sit on my bed, the laptop screen a window into another world, but my mind was in our living room, our kitchen, her bedroom. An actress with a fiery personality would have Sarah's laugh. A scene in a shower would be a twisted imagining of her morning routine. I began to seek out content that mirrored her features, her body type, her mannerisms. It was a vicious cycle, each act of fantasy feeding my desire, and each glimpse of her in real life fueling the next night's escape. One afternoon I was in the living room, trying to look like I was studying for a history test, but my phone was hidden under my textbook. My thumbs were flying across the screen, scrolling through a gallery of explicit images, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I was lost in my own world, consumed by the illicit thrill of it all. I had my headphones in, the sound of the videos a constant hum in my ears, but I still had a lingering fear of being caught. Suddenly, a shadow fell over me. I froze, my body rigid, my eyes wide. My heart, a panicked bird, flew up to my throat. I tore the headphones off, the silence, a sudden and shocking reality. I fumbled to shut my phone off, but it was no use. The screen was still on, a glowing witness to my sin. I looked up, my eyes wide with panic. It was Sarah. She was standing there, a cup of tea in her hand, a small, knowing smile on her lips. "Jake," she said, her voice soft. "What are you doing?" I swallowed hard. The words stuck in my throat. I couldn't speak. I could only stare at her, the terror of being caught warring with the bizarre, unsettling thrill of her presence. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I expected her to lecture me, to scold me, to scream at me, but she did none of those things. Instead, she just stood there, her eyes holding a strange mix of amusement and something else, something I couldn't yet decipher. Then she bent down, her face close to mine. I could smell the faint scent of cinnamon and tea on her breath. I held my breath, my body a statue of shame. Her hand, soft and warm, reached for my phone. I flinched, but she just gently took it from me. She looked at the screen, her eyes taking in the explicit images. She didn't react with disgust or anger. Instead, she just turned the screen off and placed the phone on the coffee table. "You should be studying," she said, her voice still soft, but with a new teasing edge. "History is a difficult subject." She didn't say another word. She just walked back to the kitchen, leaving me alone with my thoughts, my phone, and the crushing weight of her silent acknowledgement. The moment was over, but its impact was profound. It was a turning point. She hadn't just caught me. She had participated in my secret world, and with that small, knowing smile, she had given me a glimpse into a forbidden reality that was far more intoxicating than anything I had ever seen on a screen. The atmosphere in the house was a fragile, electrified thing. The silent understanding between Sarah and me was a new current, running through every room, charging every glance, every casual touch. The near miss in the living room had been a turning point, a gateway to a new level of forbidden intimacy. I was no longer just fantasizing in the safety of my room. The real world had begun to bleed into my secret one. My mind was a constant loop, replaying her knowing smile, the way she had handled my phone, the unsaid words that hung in the air like a promise. That night, the heat was suffocating. The air conditioner in the house was struggling, and the summer night pressed in on me like a heavy blanket. My room, usually my sanctuary, felt like an oven. My clothes felt constricting, and my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, desires, and anxieties. I knew I should sleep. My history exam was in 2 days, and I had barely looked at a single page. But my body, my mind, they had other plans. They were on a relentless self-destructive course, driven by a need that felt bigger than me. I put on my noise-canceling headphones, a familiar ritual. They were my shield, my fortress, my escape. I pulled my laptop onto my bed, the glowing screen, a beacon in the darkness. I had a new target tonight, a new search, something more specific, more vivid, something that blurred the lines even further. I was looking for a specific kind of scene, one that echoed the domestic tension of my own life, the unspoken rules and the explosive potential of their breaking. I found a video that seemed to fit perfectly. It was about a young man and his stepmother. The characters on the screen were a mirror of my own life, a twisted fictional reflection of the reality I craved. The audio was a symphony of whispered words and gasping breaths. My hand, with a practiced and desperate rhythm, moved in a familiar dance. I was a puppet, and the images on the screen, the sounds in my ears, were the strings. My mind, a traitorous and complicit accomplice, replaced the actress's face with Sarah's. Her long, dark hair, her soft smile, the look in her eyes. It was all there, a ghost in the machine. I was so engrossed, so lost in the world I had created, that I didn't hear the footsteps outside my door. I didn't hear the doorknob turn. I didn't hear the door creak open, a slow, deliberate sound that should have sent a jolt of panic through me. A shadow fell over me. It was a physical thing, a cool presence in the hot, humid room. I was so focused, so lost in my internal world, that I didn't notice it at first. But then, a sudden change in the air, a different kind of silence, snapped me out of my trance. I tore my headphones off, the sound of my own quickened breathing a shocking reality. I looked up, my eyes wide, with a primal terror. She was standing in the doorway, a simple nightgown clinging to her form in the humid air. Her face was not a mask of anger or disappointment. It was something else entirely. Her eyes, usually so warm and kind, were wide, a strange mix of shock and a deep, knowing understanding. I fumbled to shut my laptop, my hands trembling. The screen was still on, a glaring witness to my sin, but I couldn't bring myself to close it. My body was a statue of shame, frozen in the moment of my greatest vulnerability. The silence was a living, breathing thing. It stretched between us, thick with unspoken words and the weight of 1,000 secrets. I braced myself for the lecture, the tears, the disgust. But none of those things came. Instead, a strange, knowing smile touched her lips. It was a smile I had seen before, in the living room, but this time, it was different. It was bolder, more confident, more inviting. She took a step forward, the light from the hallway illuminating her figure. She wasn't just a shadow anymore. She was real. My heart, a panicked bird, flew up to my throat. She walked to the side of my bed, her movements slow and deliberate. She sat down, and the bed dipped under her weight. Her hand, which I had expected to be a weapon of judgment, reached out. My breath hitched in my throat. Her fingers, long and slender, didn't push me away. They reached for my pants, for the bulge I had tried so desperately to hide. The initial terror, the gut-wrenching shame, began to recede, replaced by a wave of something new and powerful. It was a mixture of relief, exhilaration, and a terrifying, intoxicating sense of surrender. Her hand, so gentle and so firm, took hold. The feeling was a shock, a jolt of pure pleasure that ran through me, erasing all rational thought. My mind, which had been a storm of anxiety, went blank. My body, which had been frozen in terror, began to respond. The world, my world of shame and guilt, was gone. All that was left was her touch, her scent, and the silent, unspoken promise of a release that I had craved for so long. The fear was gone, replaced by a thrill that was both forbidden and exhilarating. The dream was over, and the new, terrifying reality had just begun. The silence in the room was no longer a symbol of panic. It was a new language, a language of touch and unspoken promises. Her hand, so gentle and so firm, was a jolt of pure pleasure that ran through me, erasing all rational thought. The initial terror, the gut-wrenching shame, had been replaced by a powerful, consuming wave of relief and something else entirely, a terrifying, intoxicating sense of surrender. My mind, which had been a storm of anxiety, went blank. My body, which had been frozen in terror, began to respond with a will of its own. Her movements were slow and deliberate, not rushed or frantic. There was no trace of judgment in her touch, only a strange, compelling tenderness. She didn't speak. There was no need for words. We were in a realm beyond them, a place where a single look, a single touch, communicated more than 1,000 sentences ever could. My own breath came in quick, ragged gasps, a sharp contrast to her calm, steady demeanor. She was in complete control, and I, a storm-tossed ship, was more than willing to be guided by her. The experience was both a release and a profound shock. The years of hidden desires, of shame and guilt, of endless, secret nights in front of a screen, were all culminating in this one moment. The physical relief was immense, but it was the emotional aftermath that was truly jarring. When it was over, I lay there, my body exhausted, my mind a jumble of conflicting emotions. I had expected to feel more shame, more guilt, but instead, there was a strange, unsettling sense of peace. The secret was out. The burden I had carried for so long was suddenly shared, and the relief was intoxicating. She finally spoke, her voice a soft, low murmur that seemed to fill the room. "You were so worked up, Jake. I could feel it all the way down the hall." Her words weren't an accusation. They were an observation, a statement of fact. She was telling me she understood, that she had seen my struggle, that she had known about my private hell. I couldn't look at her. I kept my eyes fixed on the ceiling, the shadows of the fan blades dancing across the white plaster. "I didn't mean to," I finally managed to whisper, my voice raw and hoarse. "I'm sorry." She laughed, a low melodic sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Sorry for what, Jake? For being a normal, healthy teenage boy? Don't apologize for who you are. The way you're feeling, it's normal. It's part of growing up." Her words were both comforting and predatory. Was she just trying to make me feel better? Or was she using this as a way to rationalize her actions, to make it all seem less wrong? I didn't know. The lines were so blurred, so twisted, that I couldn't see the truth. All I knew was that her words felt like a lifeline, a justification for a desire I had been taught was evil. She stood up, and the bed rose slightly as she did. She walked over to the open window and pulled it shut, as if closing out the rest of the world. The room was now a sealed box, a silent, secret space where only we existed. She turned to me, her eyes meeting mine for the first time since the ordeal began. There was a strange glint in them, a mixture of compassion and something I couldn't yet name. Something knowing and a little dangerous. "You're a good boy, Jake," she said, her voice soft but firm. "And what happens between us stays between us. Do you understand?" I nodded, my throat too tight for words. The unspoken accord was sealed. It was a silent contract, an agreement that we would both carry this secret, this new reality, between us. She was no longer just my stepmother. She was my confidant, my accomplice, and my greatest temptation. She had seen my vulnerability, and instead of exploiting it, she had offered me a twisted kind of solace. She left the room as quietly as she had entered, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The silence was back, but it was different now. It wasn't a silence of fear, but a silence of contemplation. I lay there, my body buzzing with the lingering effects of our encounter, my mind trying to make sense of what had just happened. My world had officially been turned upside down. The dream was over, but the new, terrifying reality had just begun. The burden of my secret was no longer mine to carry alone. It was shared, and in sharing it, the shame had receded, replaced by a deep and unsettling sense of complicity. The days that followed were a surreal, tense ballet of unspoken intentions. Our house, once a fortress of normalcy, had become a minefield of charged glances and subtle gestures. The unspoken accord between Sarah and me was a new kind of currency, and we were both spending it recklessly. The line between our familial roles and our new secret reality wasn't just blurred, it was gone. Before, my attraction to her was a fantasy I had to force myself to indulge in. Now, it was a living, breathing thing that was so close I could almost taste it. My senses, already on high alert, had become even more attuned to her presence. I'd listen for the sound of her footsteps, my heart quickening with a mix of fear and anticipation. I'd catch her scent, a mix of cinnamon and her perfume, and my mind would instantly transport me back to that night in my room. Our encounters became more frequent, more intimate, and more emotionally complex. It was no longer just about the physical. It was about the power dynamic, the thrill of the forbidden, the dangerous dance we were performing under my father's unsuspecting nose. Sometimes it would be a casual touch in the hallway, a hand lingering on my back for a moment too long. Other times, it would be a brief, hushed conversation in the kitchen late at night, our voices barely above a whisper, our eyes communicating 1,000 unsaid things. One night, my father was out late at a business dinner. The house was quiet, and the silence was heavy with possibility. I was in the living room, trying to watch a basketball game, but my mind was elsewhere. I was on edge, waiting, my nerves a jumbled mess of anxiety and anticipation. I heard the soft click of her bedroom door opening, and my heart hammered against my ribs. I pretended to be engrossed in the game, but my ears were tuned to her every movement. She walked down the stairs, her feet bare on the wooden steps, and I could feel her presence even before I saw her. She came into the living room, a cup of tea in her hand, and sat on the couch across from me. We didn't speak for a long time. We just sat there, in the soft glow of the television, our eyes meeting in the silent, charged language we had created. "Your father called," she finally said, her voice a low murmur. "He'll be home late." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. The silence stretched between us again, thick with possibility. She put her tea down on the coffee table and leaned forward, her eyes never leaving mine. "You're a good boy, Jake," she said, her voice softer now. "You're just lonely." The words hit me like a physical blow. She saw through my defenses, my carefully constructed facade of a normal teenager. She saw the truth, the raw, unfiltered loneliness that had driven me to seek solace in the shadows. I wanted to deny it, to tell her she was wrong, but the truth was, she wasn't. I was lonely, and she, in her own twisted way, was offering to fill that void. She moved to sit next to me, her body close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from her. Her hand, so gentle and so firm, took mine. She intertwined our fingers, and the simple touch was more intimate, more powerful than anything I had ever experienced before. "We can't keep doing this," I finally managed to whisper, the guilt a hot, sharp knife in my chest. "It's wrong." She laughed, a low melodic sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Wrong for who, Jake? For your father? He's a busy man. He doesn't see you. He doesn't see your loneliness." Her words were a poison, a subtle manipulation that was so effective because it contained a grain of truth. My father was a good man, but he was also a busy man. He was often absent, lost in his work, and I had often felt invisible to him. She was exploiting that vulnerability, using it to justify our actions, to make it all seem less wrong. I didn't have an answer for her. My guilt warred with my desire, a brutal, unending battle. She saw the conflict in my eyes, and a knowing smile touched her lips. She leaned closer, her breath warm on my neck, and whispered, "Let go, Jake. Just for a little while. I'll take care of you." And in that moment, in the quiet, dark living room, with the basketball game a distant hum on the television, I surrendered. The guilt, the shame, the fear, it all melted away, replaced by a consuming desire to be taken care of, to be seen, to be touched. The line was gone. We were no longer stepmother and stepson. We were two people, caught in a dangerous dance, and the music had just begun. The house had become a stage, and we were the actors in a play no one else could see. My father, with his busy work schedule and his good-hearted but oblivious nature, was the audience. He saw the loving stepmother and the quiet, studious son. He saw a happy family. He never saw the fleeting glances, the hushed whispers, the secret touches. He never saw the web of secrets that was growing between Sarah and me, a web so intricate and delicate that a single misstep could tear it all down. The guilt, which had been temporarily subdued by the thrill of our secret, began to claw its way back. It was a physical thing, a constant knot in my stomach. The more intimate we became, the more the shame and the fear intensified. I felt like a monster, a traitor to the man who had raised me. I would catch a glimpse of my father's face, his tired smile, the lines of worry around his eyes, and a wave of self-loathing would wash over me. I was not the son he thought he had. I was a stranger living under his roof, a thief in the night stealing the love of his wife. The risk of our secret being exposed was a constant, nerve-wracking presence. It was a ticking bomb, and every day was another tick. The first sign of trouble came from my best friend, Alex. He had been my shadow since elementary school, and he knew me better than anyone. He was the one who noticed the changes. My sudden withdrawal from our usual hangouts, my jumpy, on-edge behavior, my general lack of interest in the things that used to define my life. "Dude, what's up with you?" he asked me one afternoon as we were sitting in my room playing video games. He had paused the game and was looking at me with a serious, concerned expression. "You're not yourself. You're always zoned out. Is everything okay at home?" My heart seized in my chest. "Yeah, man, everything's fine, just a lot of homework, I guess." He didn't buy it. He knew I hated homework. "Right," he said, his voice laced with suspicion. "You know, my mom said something weird the other day. She said your stepmom's been looking at you differently, like she's got a secret. She said it was strange." A cold, sharp wave of panic washed over me. I tried to stay calm, to keep my face a neutral mask. "What are you talking about? That's insane. Your mom is just being... well, she's your mom." Alex shrugged, but his eyes were still on me. "Maybe, but I'm just saying, something's off. You're different, and it's not just me who sees it." His words were a wake-up call. The world was not as blind as I had hoped. The cracks in our facade were starting to show, and it was only a matter of time before someone, maybe my father, saw them too. My psychological state became a tangled mess. I was a master of a double life, but the strain was taking its toll. I was sleeping less, eating less. My grades were slipping. My mind was a constant battleground between the exhilaration of our secret and the crushing weight of my guilt. One part of me was drawn to Sarah like a moth to a flame, craving her touch, her attention, her forbidden solace. The other part of me was screaming to run, to confess, to put an end to this dangerous game before it destroyed us all. I started to see Sarah not just as an object of desire, but as a complex, secretive woman with her own desires and her own past. I wondered about her first marriage. Was it a loveless one? Was my father giving her something her first husband couldn't? Was she using me to fill a void in her own life, just as I was using her? These thoughts, these questions, added another layer to the already complex web of secrets. The climax of this psychological drama came one night when I was in the kitchen, getting a glass of water. Sarah was there, humming to herself as she put away groceries. I stood in the doorway, watching her, the familiar mix of longing and shame swirling in my stomach. She turned and saw me, and a slow, knowing smile spread across her face. "You look stressed, Jake," she said, her voice a soft, low murmur. "Is something wrong?" The question, so innocent on the surface, felt like a loaded gun. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to scream, to confess, to end the silent game we were playing, but I couldn't. The words were stuck in my throat, choked by the guilt and the fear. "No," I lied, my voice a whisper. "Nothing's wrong." She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. She walked over to me, her hand reaching out to touch my arm. "You can tell me, Jake. We're in this together." And in that moment, in the quiet, dark kitchen, I realized the terrifying truth. We were in this together. She had seen my shame, and instead of condemning me, she had chosen to join me in it. We were not just two people caught in a dangerous game. We were two co-conspirators, bound by a secret so powerful and so destructive that it had the potential to unravel us both. The air in the house was no longer just charged with tension. It was thick with a palpable sense of unease. The web of secrets we had so carefully woven was beginning to fray at the edges. My guilt was no longer a quiet passenger. It was a screaming voice in my head, a constant reminder of the betrayal I was committing. My life had become a precarious balancing act, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that a fall was imminent. The unraveling started with a conversation. One afternoon, my father was home early from work. He found me in my room, staring blankly at my laptop, a textbook lying open but unread on my desk. He sat down on the edge of my bed, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he looked at me, really looked at me. "Son," he said, his voice soft. "What's going on? You've been distant. Your mom's noticed it too." My heart pounded in my chest. He was talking about Sarah. He was seeing the same things Alex had seen, the same changes I had so desperately tried to hide. I wanted to tell him everything, to unburden myself, to confess my sins, to beg for his forgiveness. But the words were stuck in my throat, choked by fear and shame. "I'm fine, Dad," I lied, my voice a whisper. "Just stressed about school." He nodded, but his eyes were still on me, a deep-seated worry etched onto his face. "I know I've been busy with work," he said, his voice laced with regret. "But I want you to know, you can talk to me about anything, anything at all." His words, so full of genuine love and concern, were a dagger to my heart. He was offering me a lifeline, and I was too weak, too ashamed to take it. I just sat there, my body rigid, my silence, a wall between us. He eventually left the room, his shoulders slumped in defeat, and I was left alone with my thoughts, the weight of my secret heavier than ever. The climax of our secret came a few nights later. My father was on a business trip, and the house felt empty and full of possibility. Sarah came to my room, her face a mask of something I couldn't yet decipher. She didn't speak. She just sat on the edge of my bed, her eyes fixed on me. "I can't do this anymore," I finally said, the words a raw, broken plea. "It's tearing me apart." Her expression didn't change. She just reached out and took my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. "Tearing you apart?" she said, her voice soft but with a chilling undertone. "Or making you whole, Jake?" Her words were a subtle manipulation, a way to rationalize our actions, to make it all seem less wrong. I shook my head, my eyes filling with tears. "It's wrong, Sarah. It's so wrong. What if Dad finds out?" "He won't," she said, her voice a low murmur, a promise and a threat all at once. "He's not here, Jake. It's just you and me." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I was no longer a willing participant in this dangerous game. I was a prisoner, and she was my captor. I pulled my hand away from hers, my body trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. "I'm not doing this anymore," I said, my voice firmer now. You can't just do this to me. I'm a kid." Her face changed then. The mask of a loving stepmother fell away, revealing a glimpse of the woman underneath. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, a deep-seated sadness, a flicker of a past I knew nothing about. "Do you think I wanted this?" she said, her voice a low, painful whisper. "Do you think I chose this? My first husband. He was a lot like your father, distant, absent. He never saw me. He never touched me. He never made me feel like a woman." Her words were a shock, a confession, a glimpse into a world of pain and loneliness that I had never considered. She was not just a figure of my fantasies. She was a woman with her own history, her own trauma, her own unfulfilled desires. She had come to my father's house looking for a new life, a new beginning, but she had brought her old wounds with her. And in me, a lonely, confused boy, she had found a way to heal them, in the most destructive way possible. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice thick with emotion. The anger was gone, replaced by a deep and unsettling sense of pity. "But we have to stop." She didn't argue. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with a raw, unguarded pain. She nodded, a single, decisive movement. "I know," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I know." And in that moment, the web of secrets, the dangerous, intoxicating game we had been playing, came crashing down. We were no longer accomplices. We were two broken people, standing in the rubble of our own creation. The unraveling was complete. The truth, in all its ugly, heartbreaking glory, was finally out. The days that followed were a blur of awkward silences and carefully avoided gazes. The weight of our shared secret was gone, but in its place was the heavy, crushing silence of its aftermath. We were two strangers living in the same house, bound by a past we couldn't speak of, a betrayal we couldn't undo. My father, oblivious to the storm that had passed, continued his life as if nothing had happened. He saw the silence between Sarah and me as a sign of normal teenage moodiness, a simple phase that would pass. He was wrong. It was the silence of a truth too big to be spoken, a wound too deep to be healed with words. I spent most of my time in my room, a ghost in my own home. I no longer watched the explicit videos, the thought of them now a source of deep-seated revulsion. The thrill was gone. replaced by the bitter taste of shame and regret. My innocence was gone, but in its place was a painful, profound understanding of the complexities of human desire, the loneliness that can drive people to do things they never thought they would, and the devastating consequences of acting on impulse. I saw Sarah not as a fantasy, but as a broken woman, and in her brokenness, I saw a reflection of my own. The turning point came one rainy afternoon. I was in the living room, staring out the window, lost in my thoughts, when Sarah walked in. She sat on the couch across from me, her body language guarded, her eyes full of a quiet sadness. We sat in silence for a long time, the only sound, the steady drumming of the rain against the window pane. "I'm sorry, Jake," she finally said, her voice a low, painful whisper. "For everything. I know it's not enough, but I am." Her apology was not what I had expected. It was not a plea for forgiveness or a justification of her actions. It was a simple, raw admission of guilt, a genuine expression of remorse. For the first time, I saw her not as a woman who had taken advantage of me, but as a person who was just as lost, just as lonely as I was. "I'm sorry too," I said, the words a difficult but necessary confession. I shouldn't have put us in that position." She nodded, a single, decisive movement. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was no longer a wall between us, but a shared space of understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of the pain we had caused each other. The resolution didn't come with a grand gesture or a tearful embrace. It came with small, incremental changes. We began to talk again, not about our secret, but about mundane, everyday things. We talked about my school, about her work, about my father's latest business trip. The conversations were awkward at first, but with each passing day, they became a little easier, a little more natural. The relationship was not repaired, but it was being rebuilt, brick by painful brick. We were no longer accomplices in a dangerous secret, but two people trying to find a way to coexist, to heal, to move on. The story ends not with a happily ever after, but with a glimmer of hope. I was a different person now. The boy who had been consumed by a forbidden desire was gone, replaced by a young man who had learned a difficult but essential lesson about love, loneliness, and the power of human connection. The future was uncertain, the scars of our past still fresh and raw, but for the first time in a long time, I could see a path forward, a glimmer of hope in the quiet, healing silence of a new beginning. I had lost my innocence, but I had gained something invaluable in its place, a profound and enduring understanding of myself and the messy, beautiful, and sometimes devastating nature of being human.